It was the greatest industrial project in the history of the world, and its outcome was the most significant event of the 20th century. From 1942 to 1946, the United States government conducted a highly classified operation known as the Manhattan Project. Only President Franklin D. Roosevelt and a handful of the highest-ranking military officers and government officials knew about this huge operation, the greatest scientific and engineering gamble ever undertaken. Hundreds of thousands of American civilians worked to create a weapon more powerful than anything ever known in the history of mankind. In order to accomplish this task, the U.S. government chose 3 secret locations where this work would be performed. One of these sites was hidden in a valley of East Tennessee, located between the Cumberland Plateau and the Great Smoky Mountains, and near abundant electric power from the Tennessee Valley Authority's dams. People from across the country were recruited to East Tennessee to work on this project. They came from the coal mines of Kentucky, the wheat fields of Kansas, the plains of Texas, and the factories of the Northeast. They were farmers and housewives, scientists and students, electricians and engineers. And many of their fathers, brothers, husbands, sons, and daughters were already fighting for freedom in Europe and the Pacific. On nearly 90 square miles, secured by more than 1,000 armed guards, work continued 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These extraordinary Americans worked with a trust and determination that their work would help bring an end to the Great War. Shrouded in secrecy, 125,000 laborers, scientists, engineers, and others lived and worked in the secret compound whose purpose was to obtain 2 different but related precious materials that would fuel the world's most powerful weapon, the atomic bomb. This is a story of patriotism and ingenuity, of science and resolve, of sacrifice and secrecy. This is the story of ordinary Americans who became extraordinary heroes. This is a story of a people and a place that changed the world. This is a story of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. In 1939, Europe was in the midst of conflict. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party were intent on conquering and occupying Europe. On September 1st, Hitler's German army invaded Poland, beginning World War II. American President Franklin D. Roosevelt was under domestic pressure not to enter the conflict, and on October 3rd announced that the U.S. would remain neutral in the European war. However, just 1 year earlier, in 1938, German scientists had succeeded in splitting atoms of uranium, releasing large amounts of energy in a process called fission. Fearing that German scientists were working on a super bomb, several physicists persuaded Albert Einstein to send a letter to President Roosevelt, warning him of Germany's ambitions. Convinced that the U.S. should be the first country with this type of capability, President Roosevelt asked Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi to lead the U.S. effort. The race for the bomb had begun. For the next 2 years, researchers throughout the United States worked feverishly to determine if an atomic bomb was a real possibility and how one might be built. And then the unthinkable happened. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked the Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii, destroying much of the Navy's Pacific Fleet and killing more than 3,000 American servicemen. The U.S. entered the war and stepped up its efforts to build the bomb. As a result, a top-secret project, codenamed the Manhattan Project, was created with one distinct mission: build an atomic bomb within 3 years. Colonel Leslie R. Groves was chosen to head the Manhattan Project. One of his first priorities was to find locations for production of the bomb. In September of 1942, Groves chose an area around Bear Creek Valley and Black Oak Ridge in East Tennessee, an area that would later be known as the secret city of Oak Ridge. Almost immediately, work began on the 90 square miles Groves had chosen for the project. More than 3,000 residents were forced to vacate their homes and their land, some of which had been owned by their families for generations. By October, Groves had chosen the other 2 sites, Los Alamos, New Mexico for bomb construction, and Hanford, Washington for plutonium production. primary mission of Oak Ridge was to create the explosive material for the atomic bomb. Physicists had concluded that two unique substances could be used to create the atomic bomb: uranium and plutonium. Uranium in nature exists in two forms called isotopes that are virtually identical except for a very slight difference in weight. The lighter form, uranium-235, or U-235 for short, can be used to make an atomic bomb, but U-238 cannot. So the big question was how to separate U-235 from U-238. Natural uranium consists of 99.3% U-238 and only 0.7% U-235. Even though there was no research laboratory which had a surefire method of separating the two isotopes, Groves had to start preparing a site and start building a U-235 separation plant. In separate valleys, 3 production plants were built, known only by their code names: Y-12, K-25, and X-10. A fourth area was designated as the town site for the people who would build and operate the plants. By February 1943, construction began on the vital Y-12 plant in Bear Creek Valley. The Y-12 plant would eventually process all the uranium-235 used in the first atomic bomb in just 2.5 years. The plant used an electromagnetic process to separate U-235 from natural uranium. 1,100 machines called calutrons were utilized for the separation process at Y-12. February also saw the groundbreaking for the Graphite Reactor located over the ridge in Bethel Valley at another secret site codenamed X-10. It served as a pilot facility for the larger plutonium production complex at Hanford, Washington. The Graphite Reactor was the world's first large-scale nuclear reactor and produced the world's first plutonium. The third plant was K-25, which used a gaseous diffusion process for enriching the uranium. Completed in early 1945 at a cost of $500 million, the K-25 plant was the largest building under a single roof in the world, covering more than 44 acres. Behind the steel fences, the Army built housing and all the amenities necessary for the workers and their families. Although original estimates for the population of Oak Ridge were 13,000, the plan had to be expanded many times, and by the summer of 1945, Oak Ridge had more than 75,000 residents. In the course of 3 years, Oak Ridge had become the 5th largest city in the state of Tennessee. However, the town had been built so quickly and under such tight security that it did not appear on any maps. Oak Ridge was like the rest of the country in that there was a shortage of many essentials of daily life. Standing in line for food and other items was commonplace. Also, security was tight. Access to the city was restricted to workers and residents with identification badges. Each person performed their individual task, but was forbidden to talk with others about their job. Though everyone who lived and worked in Oak Ridge knew the mission was to help win the war, only a few at the top levels of authority knew the real reasons Oak Ridge existed. The effort in Oak Ridge was huge, not only in terms of manpower, but also in terms of dollars. 60% of the nearly $2 billion spent on the Manhattan Project during the war was spent in Oak Ridge. For more than 2 years, the work in Oak Ridge feverishly continued. But on April 12, 1945, President Roosevelt died and Vice President Harry S. Truman became President of the United States. Up to this point, Truman had no knowledge of the Manhattan Project and the plans to build an atomic bomb. 2 weeks after taking office, President Truman was informed of this massive undertaking. On July 24th, after a meeting at the Potsdam Conference in Germany, the United States and Britain demanded the unconditional surrender of Japan. 4 days later, Japan refused. And on August 6, 1945, Little Boy, containing the U-235 produced in Oak Ridge, was dropped on the city of Hiroshima, Japan. After Japan refused to surrender again, the plutonium-fueled Fat Man bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. On August 14th, Japan surrendered, bringing World War II to an end. Only after the bomb had been dropped in Hiroshima did most residents of Oak Ridge understand what they had worked to create and the significant role they had played in bringing the greatest war in the history of man to an end. Decades ago, the work here at Oak Ridge helped decide the fate of the world. Today, it's helping to shape the future of the world through the visionary research and scientific innovation, which is a part of everyday life in this once secret city. The Y-12 plant, which produced the enriched uranium to power the world's first atomic bomb, is now home to the nation's supply of highly enriched uranium. K-25, the site which was once home of the world's largest building under one roof, is now being cleaned up and converted into the Heritage Center, an industrial park for technology-oriented commercial enterprise. In 1948, the X-10 plant site became the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. During the 1950s and 60s, its scientific mission shifted to peacetime research in medicine, biology, material science, and physics. As the laboratory entered the 21st century, it developed new programs in nanoscience, computer science, and biology. And with the addition of the spallation neutron source, Oak Ridge has positioned itself to be the world's foremost center for neutron science. Just as the work that was done in the secret city during World War II literally changed the world forever, the spirit of innovation is alive and well in the scientific and technological research being performed in Oak Ridge today. Just as the pioneers who settled in this East Tennessee Valley worked for a better life for their descendants, Oak Ridgers are still working to make the world a safer and better place for future generations.